GOP wants to sue President Barack Obama for executive overreach. First of all, if they do that, who pays for it? We, the taxpayers? What's going on in Washington?
You know, the president doesn't do anything very entertaining or very decent or very constitutional, but him belittling this was sort of a little bit humorous to me. He says, so they're going to sue me and I'll be gone from office when this comes about. So it is a bit of fluff as far as I'm concerned. But the gullibility of the Congress to think that they're going to stand up for the Constitution because the president delayed a regulation that the Republicans hate and they tried to get repealed, and it's a delay. And I said, compared to what? What about the president assuming the right to assassinate American citizens? He runs the NSA. He has the CIA spying on us, the whole works. And we're going to sue him because he delayed a very, very bad regulations. So to me, it's rather ironic. I don't see how that's going to gain any votes or accomplish anything whatsoever. If there's some serious infraction, he should be impeached. But for these issues that I just mentioned, the Republicans endorse all those positions. I mean, a president could be sued for cooperating with the CIA as well as the Federal Reserve System to run their secret governments. But the Republicans would never stand up against those issues, but they're going to do it because the president has delayed one of these horrible regulations.
And Ron, who pays for this lawsuit? The public taxpayers?
Of course, the taxpayers, you know, they have big pockets, and of course you wonder, you shouldn't wonder why the economy is weak, because the people are overtaxed. But of course the people are always looking for stuff too. You know, both rich and poor are dependent on the government. And Keynesianism teaches that it really doesn't matter. Deficits aren't that bad a deal. You just borrow the money, and if people won't loan us the money, we just print the money and it's not a problem. So yes, the people will pay, whether it's direct taxation. You know, they can hardly put another direct tax on anybody right now. But there is a tax. I consider all spending a tax. The question is who pays this tax? Some people pay for it in income tax, and some people pay for it by paying more interest and they loan us money. But sometimes it's paid for through inflation, and that hits the poor the most. So anytime we have this expenditure of things like this, the people pay. And my argument is even so often in Washington, what they do is they combine things. Well, you know, we have to have money for this, and it might be a reasonable thing, help the veterans or something like that. But my argument has always been they try to cut it from something else, cut it from some warmongering event overseas or building some embassy overseas, to the point where you actually save money and actually do the things that you might have more sympathy for. But never to vote for an increase in spending, because deficits are very, very dangerous to us, and yet most of the people still aren't worried about it. But the markets will dictate the results. Debt is a nemesis, and I think we're starting to feel it in this country. It certainly has come about to be a nemesis in cities like Detroit and Chicago and California and South American countries. So you can't escape that issue of debt, and yet Keynesianism and the liberals and the conservative, the big spending conservative, believe it doesn't matter. They can give lip service to it. But just like this issue you point out, it's going to be an additional expenditure for this lawsuit.
So I can make the statement Obama came out and said it's a political stunt. You'd agree with that?
Absolutely.
Okay, now, speaking of political stunts, do you think anyone's taking Sarah Palin's impeachment plans seriously?
No, not at all. It doesn't mean that there hasn't been infractions that deserved impeachment, but they have no stomach for that, and that really isn't the long-term solution. I generally look for a longer-term solution to get people to reject the ideas of interventionism overseas, interventionism in the economy here, intervention in our personal lives. And, you know, impeaching a president for some infraction, which almost everybody in the Congress endorses anyway. They're all endorsing these principles that need impeach. It's the ideology that needs impeach, and the ideology that has bringing us down has been around for about 100 years. So we have a big job on our hands, but fortunately we're hearing some voices now outside of the mainstream that are offering the alternatives to this interventionism that we've been living with.
Dr. Paul, let's talk about the economy. You think we're on the brink of massive inflation. Please explain that to me.
Well, I think, yes, we should anticipate a lot more inflation, and the typical inflation that most people consider inflation is rising prices. We already have a lot of it, but we're going to get a lot more. But I define inflation as increases in the supply of money and credit, and that has been massive. And that is the instrument that distorts so much. That is what causes the bubble. You create a lot of new money, lower interest rates, and then you create bubbles, and the money goes into areas, but not the whole economy. But right now, we see inflation in the stocks, we see it in the bonds, we see it in medical care and in education. So there's a tremendous amount of inflation. But later on, we will have the conventional inflation that people think about, and that is when consumer prices go up, and they're going up already. And unfortunately, it doesn't affect everybody equally. The poor are affected a lot more than the wealthy. Wall Street right now, that has been doing pretty well, they're not too worried about the rising cost of prices and the cost of living. The poor continue to worry about that.
Ron, what's the solution? Abolish the Fed?
That should be a starter. Just get rid of the Fed. Of course, I don't expect that to happen. The Fed will end itself. Nobody's going to legislate the end of the Fed. But you know, the really most important thing we can do right now to wake up a lot of people is to continue the process that I started years ago, and that is open up the books of the Fed. Everybody deserves to know what the Fed's been doing. And the average person, the average American, about 80% of the Americans says at least find out. So when they find out, then they're going to say abolish the Fed, because it's nothing more than a slush fund for the very wealthy. And not just our Wall Streeters and our bankers, but worldwide. We bail out just about everybody because people still put trust in the dollar, trust that that is not deserved. So eventually, all this mess will cause the people to lose trust in the dollar. That's when you're going to see a major, major crisis. I think we're getting pretty close to that